Jackie Shaw Eyebroad presents
Zoomterview.
an Administrators Unite production.
Hello, this is Jackie Shaw coming to you for the Administrators Unite community. I have with me today Diane Mancinelli, who is an attorney at law, and she is able to practice law in California, Oregon, and Washington. And she's got about 38 years of experience dealing with these issues. And what we're going to talk about in this video are disgruntled employees. So Diane, I'll leave it to you to get us started.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. All right, so one of the trends that we're seeing is disgruntled employees being terminated for whatever reason. Maybe it's a layoff, maybe you're just terminating because you don't think that they do their work well. It could be any number of reasons. Washington, Oregon, and California, at least, are all at will employment states, as is most of the 50 states, which means that you can terminate a person, an employee, for any reason whatsoever, except for protected classes: race, color, creed, national origin, religion, whistleblower, items like that. But otherwise, you can terminate them because you just don't get along with them. You can terminate them for that reason, then there's no issue. But what the trend is now becoming is that disgruntled employee does a number of different things. But typically, what they'll do is, if they're so inclined, claim a workers' comp injury. They will say that they were injured on the job and just didn't tell you because they thought they were going to get better. They didn't want to make an issue of it. They felt you might be upset, but they're subsequently, after they're terminating, now claiming that work comp injury. And you, as the employer, have to file on their claimed injury, have to put your workers' comp carrier on notice, and a claim will begin. And there is nothing you can do to stop it. Many employers call me on this and say it's fraud. And I say, I understand you believe it's fraud, but you don't have a choice. You need to put your work comp carrier on notice. The other thing that an employee who is disgruntled will do is claim that they weren't paid correctly, that they weren't given their 10-minute breaks for every 4 hours worked. They weren't given a 30-minute uninterrupted lunch break, unpaid, that they worked straight time for overtime, that they were misclassified as an exempt salary employee when they were really a non-exempt hourly employee, therefore entitled to overtime, and various types of wage violations pursuant to the codes of any state. And those lawsuits are just rampant now. I could get a new lawsuit and/or a letter from an attorney representing the former employer. I could probably get one once a week. That's how prevalent they are. And many of the lawyers are now turning those into class action lawsuits, saying that this particular disgruntled employee is representative of all your past employees for the last 4 years. So these are very expensive, time-consuming lawsuits. And even if you're right, what I always tell my clients is how much is it going to cost you to win, because you cannot recoup your attorney's fees in these type of lawsuits.
Okay, next question, disgruntled employees, overtime.
Okay, so it's key when you hire somebody that you are very clear about what their classification is. There's only two: exempt or non-exempt. An exempt employee is usually paid salaried and they get no overtime. A non-exempt employee is always hourly or piece rate and they get paid overtime. There are other differences. So an exempt salaried employee doesn't get rest breaks, doesn't get lunch breaks. I mean, you might get a lunch break, but if you fail to get a lunch break, it's not actionable. So what I tend to see, particularly with smaller employers, is they want to make everybody exempt salary so that they don't have to pay them overtime.
Right.
However, one of the most profitable claims or lawsuits by employment lawyers is misclassification. Because you misclassified somebody as salary not exempt, you didn't keep a time card on them. And as a result of not keeping a time card, which you would have had to do for the hourly employee, that salaried exempt employee can claim they work 15 hours a day, and you have no time card to prove opposite that information. And it becomes an extremely expensive lawsuit to the employer. So do not classify people as exempt salary unless they meet the state criteria for that exemption, which is extremely narrow.
Mm-hmm. I think this is such an important topic because myself, the administrators that I have as clients, and my Bookkeepers Unite group, which is a local group that I founded years ago, again and again, we run into owners. I had a bookkeeper story recently where she processed payroll and then the owner called to yell at her and said, "We don't do overtime." So this is going to be the final question for this video series. What if instead of overtime, we tell people that they can have comp time? So we keep track of the overtime and then they can have that time off later, assuming that they have time to take that time off later.
Absolutely not legal. You cannot give comp time ever for overtime. And that's just the answer. But I have something I want to add, particularly when you're dealing with bookkeepers.
Mm-hmm.
In California, it's not happening in Oregon and Washington yet, but in California, a bookkeeper can be personally liable for wage hour violations if they're knowing and they don't stop it. So you never want to be on the wrong side of that, doing, acting as even as an independent consultant, although there's no case law on that,
Mm-hmm.
there could be. But if you're an in-house bookkeeper, you could be personally liable for people that were not paid correctly by your employer.
So if the employer asks you to commit fraud by not showing overtime on timesheets, even though you know the law and you know it should be overtime, if you do that, you can become personally liable if there's a lawsuit, which is a great, that is so powerful, Diane, because the administrators watching this video now have this bodyguard they can put on when the business owner says, "I want you to violate employment laws and pay laws," to just be able to say, "I cannot do that because I can be personally liable if there's a lawsuit and I'm not willing to go there."
Exactly. And if you, as the administrator, get terminated for that, you now have a case for violations of the law, labor code laws. So
bammo, drop mic, people. Like, I'm not doing it, and if you fire me, it's going to be well. That's great advice, Diane. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.
Okay.
This has been a Get Organized Entertainment production. If you'd like to see more videos, go to administratorsunite.com.